The marble lobby of the Fiore Grand Hotel had never felt colder than the night Renzo Fiore decided that Laurel Hicks was the enemy. She had worked in that building for 2 years before he ever noticed her. Housekeeping, 3rd floor, then 4th, then the penthouse level, once management trusted her with a master key. Renzo had noticed her the way powerful men sometimes notice women they've been told not to want. Slowly, then all at once, he had noticed the careful precision of her hands, the way she never moved anything on his desk when she cleaned his private office suite, never pried, never looked at his paperwork. He had noticed the way she laughed when she thought no one was listening, big and unguarded and real, the kind of laugh that embarrassed smaller people. He had given her diamonds. He had given her a cashmere coat that cost more than her monthly rent. He had spent 8 months worshipping her the way she deserved, in private, in secret, in the dark hours of the night when Renzo Fiore was allowed to be something other than the most dangerous man in Atlanta. And now he stood at the center of his marble lobby, surrounded by 6 of his men, staring at Laurel like she was something he'd scraped off his shoe. "Your brother stole $140,000 from my operation." Renzo's voice was flat, controlled, more terrifying for its calm. He handed the inventory list to the Delgado cartel, a list with my suppliers' names on it. My roots, my people. Renzo. Laurel's voice cracked. She was shaking inside the cashmere coat. At 26, she had spent her whole life being bigger than most rooms expected her to be. 260 pounds of woman who had learned to take up space unapologetically, who had learned that her body was not an apology, who had stood her ground in cramped staff break rooms and hostile foster care group homes and every place that tried to make her feel like less. But standing in the center of Renzo Fiore's lobby tonight, she felt herself going very, very small. Tommy is an addict. He's desperate and stupid, but he didn't know what he was handing over. He didn't understand what. "And you?" Renzo stepped toward her, slow and deliberate. His dark eyes scanned her face like he was looking for a crack in a facade he'd already decided was fake. "Did you know?" "No." The word came out clean and steady, the truest thing she'd ever said. "I swear to God, Renzo, I never knew. I would have come to you. I would have. I trusted you above everyone in this building." He said it quietly, like an indictment. "Above men who've worked for me for 15 years. You were in my private office. You knew my schedule. You had access to floors my own captains don't visit." He stopped 2 feet from her. This close, she could see something move behind his eyes. Grief, maybe, or the ghost of it. Then it was gone, replaced by stone. "Either you knew, or you are the most convenient fool I've ever kept." Laurel's jaw tightened. "I am not a fool." "Take off the coat." She blinked. "What?" "The coat, the jewelry." He gestured toward her throat, where a thin gold chain rested against her collarbone. His gift, the watch. "All of it. I paid for everything you're wearing. Take it off." He turned away from her. "You leave this building with what you brought into it. Take nothing of mine." He didn't see her face when he said it. That was the only mercy. She stripped the coat from her shoulders in front of 6 men and the night security camera and the memory of everything they'd been to each other. Her hands were steady. She would not give him trembling. She unclasped the necklace, set the watch on the concierge desk, pulled the small gold earrings from her ears. She was wearing her work uniform underneath. Black slacks, white button-down, sensible flats she'd bought herself. Her own things. "Tommy," she said to Renzo's back, her voice raw but controlled. "Don't kill him. He's all I have left. Whatever you do to him, not that, please." Renzo didn't turn around. He said to the man nearest the door, "Get her out." She walked out of the Fiore Grand under her own power. That mattered to her later, in the months when she replayed it. She walked out. She was not dragged. The November air hit her like a wall. Atlanta in late fall had a bite to it that people from up north always underestimated. She stood on the sidewalk outside the hotel's grand entrance, arms wrapped around her thick waist, watching the brass and glass doors swing shut behind her. She found a gas station 3 blocks away, fluorescent lights, a bathroom that smelled like industrial cleaner and old mop water. She had bought the test that morning, a quiet habit of worry she'd been putting off for 10 days. She took it in the second stall, sitting on the edge of a toilet with a cracked seat, and she stared at 2 pink lines for a very long time. That morning, she had been rehearsing how to tell him. She'd imagined his face. The rare softness that appeared when it was just the 2 of them. No empire, no guards, no weight of blood-soaked money pressing down on his shoulders. She had imagined his hands, broad and scarred, resting carefully against her round belly. She had imagined, foolishly, that it might change something. She looked at the 2 lines in the humming silence of the gas station bathroom. Then she folded the test into her jacket pocket, her own jacket, a puffy thing she'd had for 3 years, and she stood up and she made herself a promise. He told her to take nothing of his. He was wrong. She was taking the most important thing, and Renzo Fiore was never going to know it existed. 4 years later, the bell above the door of Hicks Clean Co. chimed in the warm-lit reception of a small commercial cleaning company 3 blocks from the Savannah riverfront. Laurel looked up from behind the scheduling desk, a pencil tucked behind one ear, a stack of invoices spread in front of her. At 30, she had grown broader across the shoulders, softer in the face, more certain in every part of herself. The years she'd spent being told her body was a problem had eventually given way to the quiet revelation that it was, in fact, a very capable machine, one that had scraped together emergency savings while 7 months pregnant, signed a lease on a studio apartment with a cashier's check from 3 simultaneous cleaning jobs, and built a legitimate business from the kind of stubborn refusal to disappear that nobody had ever taught her. She'd figured that out entirely on her own. "Mama!" A small voice rose from the back corner of the reception area, where a 3-year-old boy sat at a plastic table with an enormous coloring book. "The orange is gone. Use red, baby. Sunsets can be whatever color you want." Cole Hicks looked up from his coloring book with an expression of profound skepticism. He had Laurel's wide, dimpled cheeks and her curly dark hair, but his eyes, already sharp and assessing at 3 years old, a particular shade of storm cloud gray that had nothing to do with anyone in Laurel's family, were entirely his father's. The way he pressed his mouth into a flat line when he disagreed with something was entirely his father's too. Laurel had learned to breathe through those moments. She'd had 4 years of practice. The bell above the door chimed again. She looked up, and the warmth went out of the room. The man standing in her doorway was 6'2", well-dressed, with the particular stillness of someone who had spent his professional life in rooms where violence could start at any second. She knew his face. She had spent 4 years hoping never to see it again. Ward Pellico, Renzo Fiore's head of security, standing in the middle of her Savannah reception area. He looked as stunned as she felt. His eyes moved over the scheduling desk, the framed business license on the wall, Laurel's pencil and her invoice stack, and her ordinary, carefully constructed life. And then they moved, almost involuntarily, to the small boy in the corner. Cole chose that precise moment to look up. Ward Pellico went completely still. Laurel was on her feet before she was fully conscious of moving. She put herself between Cole and the door in 3 steps, her wide frame deliberately blocking Ward's sightline. Her voice came out level and quiet. "What are you doing in Savannah?" It was not a question. "Laurel." Ward's voice came out rough. He was not looking at her. He was looking at the 3-year-old with Renzo Fiore's eyes. "I didn't. I was here for a property transaction. I stopped because I saw the sign and I thought..." He swallowed. "We thought you were dead." "I know what you thought." She kept her body angled between them. "Tommy, Is my brother alive or not?" Ward's face did something complicated. "I genuinely don't know," he said carefully. "That was above my access level." She held his gaze for a long moment. Then, "You need to leave. Right now. You didn't see me. You didn't see this address. You didn't see anything." She took one step toward him, and whatever Ward Pellico read in her face made him take a corresponding step back. "If you ever had 1 ounce of decencies, Ward, you walk out that door, and you forget you were ever in Savannah." Cole's chair scraped. Small footsteps on linoleum. "Mama," a tug on her sleeve. "The red stuck too. The cap won't come off." She turned. Cole was holding up a crayon with the cap jammed sideways. She crouched to work it free without looking up at Ward, her whole body still angled to shield her son. When she straightened, Ward was gone. The bell above the door was still settling into silence. Laurel stood in the middle of her reception area with a red crayon in her hand, and the sound of her own heartbeat very loud in her ears. She looked at Cole. "Okay, baby bear," she said in the most ordinary voice she could manage. "Let's get your bag. We're taking a little trip." 1,000 miles north in the top-floor office of the Fiore Grand, Renzo Fiore was staring at a text from Ward Pellico. 3 words: "I found her." And below it, a photograph. It was taken through a window, slightly blurred, the angle imperfect. A wide-framed woman crouching in front of a small boy, fixing something in his hand. The boy's face was turned just enough toward the camera. Just enough. Renzo picked up his whiskey glass, set it down without drinking. He zoomed in on the boy's face. The glass slipped out of his hand. It didn't shatter, thick crystal, but the whiskey spread across his paperwork in a slow dark tide, and Renzo Fiore did not move to stop it. He had asked himself the question in the first year, in the months after he'd stopped being able to sleep without whiskey, when he'd catch himself calculating dates and then forcing himself to stop. He had pushed the thought down hard, every time, because it was unbearable, and because he told himself that if something like that had happened, she would have found a way to tell him. He'd told himself a lot of things that first year. He stood up from his desk. "Matthias," he said to the man by the door, "get the car." Laurel had 40 minutes between Ward's exit and the sound of the door coming off its hinges. She used 38 of them packing. She was methodical about it. Cole's medication, his blanket, the waterproof folder of documents, the envelope of emergency cash from the fireproof safe behind the bathroom mirror, the small framed photo of Tommy from before everything went wrong. She moved fast and quiet, and with the practiced efficiency of someone who had spent her entire life needing to be ready to leave. Cole stood in the bedroom doorway, watching her with serious eyes. "Are we going on an adventure?" "Yes, baby." She folded his dinosaur pajamas with hands that were not quite steady. "A surprise one." "Do I bring Rex?" "Bring Rex." She had the duffel over her shoulder, and Cole's hand in hers, and was reaching for the deadbolt on the front door when the deadbolt exploded inward. She stumbled back, pulling Cole behind her in one motion, and grabbed the cast-iron skillet from the stovetop. Reflex proximity, 3 years of never being unarmed in her own home, and pressed Cole flat against the wall with her body between him and the door, using every inch of her frame as a barrier the way she had since the moment he was born. Renzo Fiore filled the doorway. She had half forgotten, in 4 years, what he looked like at close range. He was in a dark overcoat, broad-shouldered, with 2 days of stubble, and the kind of exhaustion she'd never seen on him before. Hollowed out and desperate, and something else underneath it that she didn't want to name. His eyes found her immediately. They moved over her face, her raised arm, the skillet, and she saw relief, raw and physical, the kind that moves through a person's whole frame, passed through him so fast he almost managed to hide it. "Laurel," he said, his voice had gone rough. "Take one more step and I will split your skull open." She meant every word. He could see that she did. He stopped. "I'm not here to hurt you. You kicked my door off the hinges. I had to see you." He said it like an admission rather than an excuse. "I needed to see that you were." He stopped. "I looked for you after. I looked for almost a year." "Not hard enough." "Laurel." "You had 4 years," she said. 4 years, Renzo. You knew where I worked. You knew my whole life before you threw me out of it. And you showed up now." Her voice didn't waver. She was proud of that later. "So, whatever you came to say it fast, because my son and I were leaving." "Mama." Cole's voice came from directly behind her hip. Small hands wrapped around her thigh. And then, before she could stop him, a 3-year-old stepped out from behind her and stood in the middle of the kitchen and looked at Renzo Fiore with complete and total calm. The room stopped. Cole studied the large stranger the way he studied everything he found interesting, thoroughly, without any apparent concern for the stranger's feelings on the matter. Then he crossed his arms over his small chest. The gesture was unconscious. It was completely inherited. "Who are you?" Renzo Fiore's legs went. He caught himself on the doorframe. His hand pressed flat against the wood, and he stood there, looking at a 3-year-old boy with his own eyes, looking back at him from a different face. And something crossed his expression that Laurel had never once seen on him in all the time she'd known him. He went down to his knee on the kitchen linoleum. "My name is Renzo," he said. His voice was almost inaudible. "Do you know my mama?" A long pause. "Yes," Renzo said as due. "I've known her for a long time." Cole considered this with great seriousness. Then he looked at Laurel. "Is he staying for dinner?" "Bedroom," Laurel said very quietly. "Get Rex and your blanket right now, please." Cole went, dragging his feet with theatrical reluctance, making it entirely clear he intended to listen through the wall. Laurel looked at Renzo still on one knee on her floor, and she felt the weight of the skillet in her hand, and she felt 4 years of grief and fury and exhausted, bone-deep love shifting around inside her chest like furniture in an earthquake. "Get up," she said. He did. "He has your eyes." She said it without softness, just fact. "He's had them since he was born." "That doesn't give you rights. You made your choice the night you stripped the coat off my back and told me I was nothing to you but a warm place to sleep." "I never said." "You said I was a distraction." The words came out clean, and even the way you say things you've rehearsed in an empty room 100 times. Those were your exact words. "A soft place to land." She met his eyes. "I heard you, Renzo, very clearly." He flinched. It was small, but she caught it. "I built this," she continued. "This business, this apartment, this life. I built it while I was pregnant and exhausted and terrified, and I built it alone, and I am extraordinarily proud of it. You don't walk in here and take credit for something you had no part in." Her voice cracked on the last sentence. She let it. "That boy in there is mine. I earned him." The window above the sink shattered. The sound that followed was not quite a gunshot. Suppressed, a compressed crack, and then another, and the drywall behind Laurel's shoulder bloomed with 2 holes that hadn't existed a second ago. Renzo moved before she fully processed what was happening. He was across the kitchen in 2 strides, one arm going around her, turning his body into a wall between her and the window, steering them both hard into the hallway. "Down," he said, and his voice was completely transformed, flat and operational, every trace of grief stripped out. "Stay down and do not move." "Cole." "I'll get him. Stay down." She was already moving. She hit Cole's bedroom door at the same moment Renzo did, and they went in low together. Cole was in the corner by his bed, with Rex clutched against his chest, and his face very white and perfectly still. Laurel grabbed him and pressed him flat to the floor, and covered him with her body the way she always did, every instinct she had narrowing to one absolute directive. Between her child and whatever was coming, always, her body first. Renzo was at the window. He had a gun she hadn't seen him draw. "Delgados," he said, his jaw tight. "They followed me from Atlanta. They've been waiting for me to leave my compound without full detail." Another compressed crack from the hallway, a heavy thud. "I'm sorry, I moved too fast. I didn't think they were this close behind me." "You brought your war to my son's house." She said it into Cole's hair, her cheek pressed against his curls, feeling his heartbeat going rabbit fast beneath her hands. "I know." Renzo looked at her over his shoulder. For a single unguarded second, the operational mask cracked open and she saw what lived underneath it. Not the Don, not the man who had thrown her out into November, but someone who had just now fully and completely understood the weight of what he'd destroyed. "I know, I'm going to get you both out, you have my word." He did. It cost him a bullet in the left side, taken while he physically blocked the back hallway with his own body as Laurel moved Cole through the service exit. His remaining 2 security men handled what came next in the front of the apartment. Renzo handled walking himself to the car with a hole in him, which he accomplished through what appeared to be sheer, unreasonable stubbornness. He ended up sitting against her kitchen wall 20 minutes later while she pressed a folded dish towel to his side with both hands, and Cole sat quietly in the doorway, watching with large and very serious eyes. "Press harder," she told him. "You're already cracking a rib." "Good. Think of it as a reminder." She checked the wound, repositioned the towel, pressed again. Through the wall she could hear his security on the phone, arranging medical extraction. "Tell me about Tommy." Renzo was quiet. "Renzo. He's alive." He said it to the floor first, then looked up at her. "He's been at a residential treatment program in Colorado since the week I sent you away. I've paid for everything. All 4 years." Laurel's hands went still. The silence stretched long enough that Cole got up from the doorway and crossed the kitchen and sat down directly beside Renzo, apparently having decided on his own authority that the large injured man required company. He didn't say anything. He just settled there with Rex in his lap, a small, solid presence pressed against Renzo's uninjured side. "He's clean?" Laurel's voice came out thin. "Since month 7. He works at the facility now." Renzo shifted, winced. "Peer support. He talks to the new patients coming in. He's good, Laurel. He asks about you. I couldn't tell him where you were because I didn't know." Laurel stared at him. The grief she had carried for 4 years, the particular bone-settled weight of mourning someone you've been told is gone, of learning to stop reaching for a person you'll never reach again, shifted on its foundation. She felt the thing that lives on the far side of grief, which is fury, rise up hot and fast, and then beneath it, like bedrock under floodwater, the terrible and overwhelming relief. "You should have told me that night." Her voice was unsteady now. She didn't try to steady it. "You should have told me he was alive. I spent 4 years thinking you killed my brother." "I know. I grieved him." The words came out rough and real. "I cried for him, I told Cole. When he's old enough to ask, I was going to have to tell him his uncle was gone because of me. I carried that." "I know." Renzo's voice was very quiet. "I told you he was dead because I was angry and my pride was wounded, and because I believed if you thought I'd done the worst thing imaginable, you wouldn't try to come back. I thought." He stopped, his jaw tightened. "I thought it was cleaner." "Cleaner," she repeated. "I was wrong." He said it without qualification. "I was wrong about almost everything." Cole, who had been listening to all of this with the concentrated attention of a small person who understands considerably more than adults expect, carefully placed Rex in Renzo's lap. He patted the plastic dinosaur once, as if settling it in. Then he looked at Renzo with his storm cloud eyes and said, with the devastating directness of a 3-year-old, "You're sad." Renzo looked at the boy beside him for a long moment. Something moved through his face that Laurel had never seen there before. "Yeah," he said, "I am." Rex helps, Cole said simply, and looked back at the kitchen wall. Laurel pressed her eyes shut for 3 seconds, then she opened them. "I need you to listen to me," she said. She looked at Renzo with the directness of someone who had spent 4 years making every decision alone, who had signed her own leases and filed her own taxes and navigated every emergency without anyone to call. "I am not moving to Atlanta. I am not living in your building as your woman in a private room that nobody mentions. I am not something you keep in a box when it suits you." Renzo didn't look away. "Okay. If Cole knows you, he knows you as his father, not a visitor who shows up between wars, not a man who calls when it's convenient. His father, consistently, even when it's hard and especially when it costs you something. Yes. And you figure out how to make your world safe enough that my son grows up without bullet holes in his kitchen wall. That is not a request." "It's not," Renzo said. "And I am not your secret," she said it plainly, without embarrassment or apology. "Whatever this is going forward, it is real or it is nothing. I'm not going back to hiding." Renzo looked at her for a long moment. He was pale from blood loss, and his side was still bleeding, and Cole was sitting against him, feeding Rex invisible food with a plastic leaf torn from the coloring book, completely unconcerned. "I'm not asking you to trust me," Renzo said. "I know I don't have that. I'm asking you to let me start working to deserve it." He paused. "And I want to talk to Tommy. I want you to be there when I do." Laurel studied him. She had spent 4 years learning to read rooms. Clients deciding whether to sign contracts, landlords deciding whether to rent to a young single mother, people who underestimated her, people who tried to cheat her on invoices, people who looked at her size and decided she couldn't be taken seriously. She had gotten very, very good at knowing when someone was performing and when they weren't. What she saw in Renzo Fiore's face, on her kitchen floor, with her son pressed against his uninjured side, was not a performance. She exhaled. "The medical team gets here," she said, "and then you're calling Tommy." The thing that moved through Renzo's expression was not relief exactly, or not only that. It was something older and more complicated, the look of a man who'd spent 4 years in every room of a very large empire and found all of them empty. "Yeah," he said. "Okay." Cole leaned his head against Renzo's arm with the easy animal confidence of a child who has decided a person is safe and sees no reason to debate it further. Renzo went very still, the way people go still when they're afraid to disturb something fragile and real. And then slowly, carefully, he rested his cheek against the top of the boy's dark curls. Laurel watched them from across the kitchen. She thought about the gas station bathroom, the 2 pink lines in the fluorescent light, the cold November air outside, and the weight of a promise she had made to herself about what she was taking when she walked away. She had taken everything, as it turned out. The only thing that ever mattered. And now, 4 years later, she was the one holding the door.